I'm going to read some of your book. The prologue, sounding the alarm. I love our country. I've committed my life to defending the safety, security, and freedom of the American people. Our country is in the midst of an existential crisis. I have friends who are Democrats, Republicans, Independents, and Libertarians. I have nothing but respect for all of them. Some work in the field of politics, but most do not. This book is not being written out of spite or animosity toward anyone because of their political affiliation. My message to you is an urgent warning. Those in control of today's Democrat Party and permanent Washington are leading us down a very dangerous path that threatens our freedom, democracy, and ability to thrive in a peaceful, prosperous country. That's the opening. Coming out of the gate swinging.
Are you paying attention?
You came out of the gate. I will say, when I read that, I was like, okay, this is going to be a very straightforward assessment of what's going on. And, you specifically say the Democrat Party and permanent Washington. Permanent Washington, there's permanent Washington that's Republican, there's permanent Washington that are conservative, there's permanent Washington that are liberal, there's permanent Washington that are Democrats, but you call it the Democrat Party. Is that because that's what you were in and that's what you saw? Or do you see a difference? And we kind of already touched on this, but do you see an actual difference between the Democrat establishment and the Republican establishment?
Two things. First, I got some notes when I put out the book cover before the book actually came out, and I got some notes from some supporters of mine who were being very helpful, saying, "Hey, you got a typo on the book on your book cover. It's supposed to be Democratic Party, but you forgot those last couple of letters there." I was very intentional in using that term because, unfortunately, this party that I used to belong to is not democratic in practice, in execution, in reality at all. And I think that's an important point to make. In many ways, there are similarities and overlap there between the permanent Washington establishment, which includes not only those who are elected officials from both parties, but it is that administrative state. It is the big propaganda media that essentially do the bidding of the Democrat elite. It is those who are working, unfortunately, within the national security state in some ways to weaponize those institutions to execute the agenda of the Democrat elite. It is the big tech monopolies who are acting as the arm of the Democrat elite to circumvent the Constitution and censor everyday Americans. So it is the shortest term that creates that umbrella of those who ultimately don't have the Constitution or our best interests at heart. Sometimes, when you look at some of the Republicans who are part of that permanent Washington establishment, in some areas there may be a divergence or a disagreement with the Democrat elite on different issues, but fundamentally on the issues of war and peace, of civil liberties, and of freedom, there is far too much that they stand together on that really does speak to that hunger for power as being the most important thing above all else. And on, when you look at, Nikki Haley, for example, is an example of a prominent Republican who is very much a part of and embodies what is that Republican role in the permanent Washington establishment, and why I'm lumping them together with the Democrat elite and the threat that they pose. She talks about, towards the end of her campaign for president in the primary this year, she talked about how, she would bring back, and Mike Pence did the same. They talked about the norms. We have to protect the norms. And they use this argument as their fuel as to why their path for the Republican Party is superior to the path that Donald Trump has taken and the kind of leadership that he brings. We have to protect the norms. We have to protect the institutions. But the thing is, And whether they're just so out of touch or what, what exactly is driving them, I don't know, but they are out of touch. Because for me, and I think for most Americans, you're like, well, we look at how in debt our country is. We look at how, under this administration and others in the past, how the quote unquote norms in foreign policy have gotten us into a worse place from a national security standpoint, has made us less safe and secure. You look at our economy, you look at inflation, you look at, big government overreach in so many parts of our lives, a violation of civil liberties. If those are the norms you're talking about, and they are the norms they're talking about, like, no, we should not protect those norms. Those norms go against the interests in every respect of the American people. And that's something that if you're paying attention and if you're actually out in the country and you're truly listening and understanding why the American people feel the way that they do, then you'll see how that separation between that permanent Washington and the Democrat elite is wildly out of touch with reality, and how what they are attached to, which is rooted in that desire to hold on to that stranglehold of power, how that directly undermines the foundational principles of who we are as a country.
Fast forward a little bit. What's at stake here is far greater than Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Our democracy is being destroyed by the permanent Washington elite in both political parties who truly believe they, and not the American people, have the right and duty to determine who we want to serve and lead our country. They readily dismiss the U.S. Constitution, the rule of law, the voices of American people, anointing themselves as the ones who have the power and justification to decide who will become president. Give me an example of a human that's part of the Washington elite that you're talking about. Just, a random example of one of these people that's been there for 17 years and what their little daily things and what they're controlling and touching. You look at the Nikki Haley's, you look at the Mitch McConnells, you look at the Nancy Pelosi's, you look at the Chuck Schumers, and there are many, many more. You look at the Rachel Maddows, you look at the wonderful ladies of The View. There are a lot of different examples of people who are part of that group. Meghan McCain told me when she was on The View one day, we didn't know each other very well at that time, but she called me one day when I was... Is this when she was on there every day?
Yeah, this is when she was part of the cast of that show. And I had either just been on... I had just been on their show. And she called me later and she's like, the weirdest thing happened. She said, as we were prepping that morning of the show, usually the producers will go around into the makeup rooms as they're getting ready and to kind of brief them. Okay, here are the guests of the day. Here's kind of the major talking points and the major areas that we want to focus on. And she said it was the first time that they had gone and done the show, and every other person who was sitting as a co-host on that show, they were all saying the same thing, using the exact same words when it came to me. They were not kind, for those who don't know. But Meghan was singled out and left out. She didn't get the brief. Mm-hmm. She didn't get the memo. But she said that was the first time that she had seen anything like that for the years that she had done the show, where it was as though someone provided them with exact talking points, like, hey, she's coming on your show. Here are the things that we want you to say. And so when we talk about this, Washington elite, the tentacles spread out very far, and you can once you actually start paying attention, I think a lot more people are in the country now maybe than they have been over the last several years. You start to see that common thread and that connection. Like, wait, how come all these people are saying the same thing? How come nobody's questioning what they're actually saying.
You ever seen those videos where they have like a newscaster talking somewhere in Nebraska, and then they put another one, and it's everyone saying the same thing? And I get some of that because they're all getting sort of fed, the story from AP or something like this. But then when it's these weird sort of opinion pieces, and they're all saying the exact same thing, and you're thinking to yourself, oh, okay, this is being force fed down our throat. That's what's happening.
Yeah.
And that's so the Washington elite has their fingers and their tentacles out there in the media. That's what we're hearing. That's what we're getting programmed with.
Yeah.